In 1982, the British military had to fight a war about 8,000 miles away from home in the South Atlantic.
Right, the Falklands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, they didn't win that conflict because they had better missiles or, faster jets.
No, not at all.
They won because they literally figured out how to requisition civilian ocean liners, load them up with supplies, and just consistently refuel their warships in the middle of these freezing, massive Atlantic gales.
It's honestly incredible when you look at the logistics of it.
Right, and that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to this deep dive into an exclusive piece of strategic analysis on global naval power. We're on a mission today to look past the flashy missile destroyers and those billion-dollar steel hulls.
Yeah, the stuff that usually gets all the headlines.
Exactly. We want to uncover the true hidden engine that actually decides maritime wars. And the paradigm shift in our source material today is just stark. I mean, battleships might win battles, but logistics wins wars.
It really does.
Yeah.
And, if you want to understand how global power actually functions, you have to look at those supply lines.
Yeah, for sure.
Understanding naval logistics gives you this kind of X-ray vision into geopolitics.
Yeah.
It reveals the invisible scaffolding that's holding up global trade and international relations.
And I love how the source material starts this analysis. It uses a really grounding concept. A modern warship is not just a weapons platform. It is a floating city.
A very heavily armed floating city.
Oh, right. I mean, think about just the baseline requirements for a city to exist at all, let alone, project military force across the globe.
You've got a highly trained population of the crew, right?
Yeah, hundreds or thousands of people.
Exactly. And they need thousands of calories a day, fresh water, medical care. And then you have the infrastructure. The ship needs massive amounts of fuel, intricate spare parts, just tons of ammunition.
Right. And if you sever the supply of those raw necessities, a state-of-the-art aircraft carrier just instantly becomes a powerless steel hull drifting aimlessly at sea.
It essentially becomes a ghost ship. And the most immediate, inescapable requirement for that floating city is fuel.
Which makes sense.
Right, because when a fleet is operating thousands of kilometers from its home port, every single liter of fuel burned has to be accounted for. It has to be modeled and planned well in advance.
Right.
Because the logistics of liquid energy dictate the entire operational radius of a fleet.
Okay, wait. I want to push back on that for just a second.
Sure.
Because when we talk about projecting global power, the flagship is usually an aircraft carrier, right? And modern supercarriers are nuclear powered.
That's true.
So the whole advantage of a nuclear reactor is that the ship can sail for, 20 years without ever needing to pull into a gas station? So if the centerpiece of the fleet doesn't use gas, it seems like fuel shouldn't be the debilitating bottleneck the source claims it is, right?
It's a really common assumption, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But it totally overlooks the anatomy of a strike group.
How so?
Well, the carrier, the floating airfield itself, is nuclear powered, yes.
Yeah.
But a carrier never, ever deploys alone.
Oh, right, the escorts.
Exactly. It requires a protective ring of conventionally powered escort ships. You've got the guided missile destroyers, the cruisers, the frigates, all the ships that provide the anti-submarine and anti-aircraft screen.
And they run on gas?
They burn staggering quantities of marine diesel. And furthermore, the air wing sitting on the deck of that nuclear carrier, they don't run on splitting atoms.
Right, the jets need fuel.
The fighter jets, the early warning radar planes, the helicopters, they consume thousands and thousands of gallons of aviation fuel every single day of flight operations.
Wow, okay, so a nuclear-powered fleet is still just completely tethered to a continuous, uninterrupted pipeline of fossil fuels.
Entirely tethered, which introduces what the analysis calls the defining characteristic of a true blue water navy.
And just for you listening, if you're following along, a blue water navy is a maritime force that's capable of operating globally across the deep oceans, not just, hugging their own coastlines.
Right. And the innovation that makes this blue water capability possible isn't like a new radar system. It's a process called underway replenishment.
Yes, the underway replenishment.
Because historically, when a ship ran low on supplies or fuel, it had to abandon its station, turn around, and literally sail back to a friendly port.
Which takes you totally out of the fight.
Exactly. Underway replenishment changes that operational math completely. It allows specialized supply ships to transfer fuel, munitions, and provisions to combat ships while both are actively sailing in the open ocean.
The briefing notes describe the mechanics of this, and honestly, the best analogy I could think of is Imagine two massive RVs speeding down the highway at 60 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's a great way to picture it.
And you have to open the windows, string a clothesline between them, and pass over 100-pound bags of groceries and a pressurized gasoline hose.
All without swerving.
Yes, all without swerving.
And you have to do it while the highway itself is rolling and pitching under your tires.
It sounds impossible.
I mean, the physics of underway replenishment are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Because when two massive ships get parallel and close the distance to pass those hoses over, you encounter something called the Venturi effect.
The Venturi effect.
Right. Yeah. So the water accelerating between the narrow gap of the two hulls creates this low pressure zone. It literally creates a suction force that is trying to smash a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier and a 40,000-ton supply ship together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the helmsmen on both vessels have to constantly steer away from each other by these tiny micro-degrees just to maintain a parallel heading.
While also compensating for huge ocean swells. I was reading about the tension high lines they use to transfer the heavy pallets of food and spare parts.
Oh yeah, the high lines are fascinating.
Because if the ships roll away from each other on a wave, the static cable will just instantly snap under that immense strain.
Right, it would just break.
So they use these automated tensioning systems that rapidly spool and unspool the wire in real time, just absorbing the motion of the ocean so the pallet stays level, suspended in midair.
It's an insane engineering feat. But master that chaotic physics problem, and your fleet's range becomes virtually infinite.
You transform a localized coastal defense force into a true global power projection tool.
Exactly. And because of this capability, the source analysis makes a really compelling assertion. They argue that the fleet replenishment ships, the unglamorous tankers and dry cargo vessels, are actually the most valuable assets in any naval force.
Not the carriers.
No, the supply ships. They are the enablers of the entire strategic posture.
So moving from just moving the ship to actually fighting the ship, the source material pivots to this fascinating breakdown of the war of attrition.
Yeah, this part is really critical.
Because fuel keeps the engines turning, sure, but surviving combat or just surviving the ocean environment itself comes down to ammunition, maintenance, and human endurance.
The math of modern naval combat is terrifyingly finite.
Yeah.
We aren't in the age of galleons with a hold full of infinite cannonballs anymore.
Right, exactly.
Today's warfare relies on precision-guided interceptors and strike missiles. And space on a warship is at an absolute premium.
So they use VLS, right?
Right. Modern destroyers and cruisers utilize vertical launch systems, or VLS. These are specialized armored cells embedded right in the deck of the ship, and each one holds a single, highly sophisticated missile.
Just one.
Just one per cell. A ship only has a set number of these cells. So the sobering reality is that every single defensive interceptor launched at an incoming threat directly reduces that ship's remaining combat capability.
And once that VLS tube is empty, it stays empty until you go home.
Yes, it does.
Because I was looking into this, wondering why they can't just restock those missiles using that underway replenishment we just talked about.
Oh yeah, people ask that all the time.
Right. But a Tomahawk cruise missile weighs over 3,000 pounds. If you try to use a heavy crane to lower a live warhead into a tight steel box while both the ship and the crane are riding a 6-foot ocean swell.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. A swing of even a few inches will crush the delicate launch cell, or worse, drop a live munition right on the deck.
Which is why you absolutely need the calm, static waters of a protected harbor to safely reload a vertical launch system. In a prolonged conflict, managing your magazine depth becomes your primary strategic concern.
The magazine depth, meaning just how many missiles you have left.
Exactly. Because if an adversary can swarm you with cheap, mass-produced drones and force you to expend your $3 million interceptor missiles just to shoot them down, they have achieved a massive victory.
Wow, yeah.
They haven't just imposed a huge financial cost. They've effectively disarmed a billion-dollar warship without ever actually landing a kinetic hit on it.
The logistics of the ammunition dictate the entire strategy of the engagement.
Absolutely.
But even in peacetime, right, this floating city is fighting a relentless war of attrition against its own environment. The ocean is just uniquely hostile to modern machinery.
It really is.
We all know saltwater causes rust, but the logistical burden of that is just staggering.
Well, the primary issue they deal with is galvanic corrosion.
Galvanic corrosion.
Yeah, so when you introduce dissimilar metals, which a modern warship is just full of, into an electrolyte like saltwater, it creates this battery effect that literally eats away at the weaker metal.
Oh, wow.
It degrades the delicate waveguides in radar arrays, it fouls the propulsion systems, and even the seawater cooling intakes for the nuclear reactors.
The sheer man-hours dedicated just to chipping paint and battling that galvanic corrosion, I mean, it means your crew is expending enormous amounts of energy just keeping the ship from dissolving into the ocean.
Literally dissolving, yeah.
It framed the supply depot in a completely new light for me. The people managing the unimaginable inventories of specialized marine paint, the zinc anodes, the engine grease, they are the real backbone of the operation.
They absolutely are.
Right.
Without predictive maintenance and massive floating repair docks, a fleet just rusts into obsolescence.
Which brings us to the human element of all this.
Yeah.
Because a ship doesn't fight, its crew does. And operating Aegis radar consoles, maintaining pressurized water reactors, and flying supersonic jets requires intense cognitive focus.
The psychological and physical toll of being deployed thousands of miles from home in a high-stress environment is immense.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
If the logistics chain fails to provide the basic necessities of life-quality food, clean water, medical supplies, adequate rest, morale just collapses. And when morale collapses, the combat effectiveness of a multi-billion-dollar platform drops to zero.
But there is a geographical limit to all of this underway replenishment and morale building, right?
Yeah.
You can't just float a dry dock in the middle of a typhoon, and you can't warehouse thousands of precision missiles on a cargo ship indefinitely.
No, you can't.
To sustain these floating cities, you need actual land. You need friends with good real estate.
And this is exactly where naval strategy intersects directly with global diplomacy. Behind every deployed fleet lies a vast global network of civilian ports, secure warehouses, and fuel depots. A nation might possess the most technologically advanced warships on the planet, but if they lack an overseas logistics infrastructure, if they don't have allied ports where they can safely pull in, resupply, and perform heavy maintenance, their ability to sustain operations in a prolonged conflict is severely compromised.
Our source material points back to the Falklands War again to prove this exact point.
Right.
The logistical nightmare of projecting power 8,000 miles away wasn't solved just by military ships. The British had to requisition the Queen Elizabeth II cruise liner to transport thousands of troops because they simply didn't have the military transport capacity.
Wow.
The victory was a triumph of managing incredibly stretched, vulnerable supply lines at the very edge of their operational limits.
And taking that historical lesson into the present day, the geographical focus of the analysis shifts to the Indo-Pacific.
Right. And before we dive into the specifics of that region, I want to explicitly remind you, the listener, that we are impartially looking at the strategic analysis provided in the source material here.
Absolutely.
We're not taking political sides. We're not endorsing specific geopolitical ambitions of any country. We're simply observing how the nations in this region clearly recognize that economic survival and naval power both rely entirely on sustained, secure logistics.
Right, we're just looking at the mechanics of it. And the Indo-Pacific is the world's most strategically significant maritime region. I mean, it carries an enormous percentage of global trade.
Huge.
So the geography of the region really dictates the strategy of the nations within it. Take India, for example, which sits strategically right at the center of the Indian Ocean.
Right.
The vast majority of India's international trade, and crucially, its energy imports, travel across those specific sea lanes. Protecting those routes requires deep logistics agreements with neighboring nations, specialized replenishment vessels, and strategically located island bases.
And the analysis highlights a very specific case study here, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. For a mental map, if you're listening, this is a 500-mile chain of islands positioned near the western entrance to the Strait of Malacca.
And the Strait of Malacca is one of the world's most critical maritime choke points.
Yeah.
Millions of barrels of oil and massive volumes of commercial shipping flow through that narrow corridor every single day.
Every day.
By developing military infrastructure on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, India has established a really valuable forward logistics and surveillance hub. It basically acts as a stationary, unsinkable logistical asset that allows them to monitor that vital choke point without having to continuously cycle ships back and forth from the mainland.
It makes total sense, but India isn't the only nation recognizing the power of physical real estate in that wider region. The source also impartially notes China's expanding global logistical footprint.
Right.
They specifically detailed China's overseas support facility in Djibouti, which is situated on the Horn of Africa near another major choke point, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. They also note China's broader investments in commercial port infrastructure around the globe.
Yeah, and Both of these examples, India's island hubs and China's overseas facilities, they just demonstrate a shared, fundamental understanding of modern maritime power. You cannot separate economic security from naval capability.
They're completely linked.
Exactly.
Right?
And neither can exist without secure, redundant logistical networks. If you do not have friendly locations to park, repair, and refuel your floating cities, your influence is strictly limited to your own coastline.
But since these logistics networks, the civilian ports, the fuel depots, the highly complex supply chains are the undisputed backbone of naval power, the source reaches a pretty sobering conclusion.
Yeah, this part is fascinating.
Because these networks are no longer just supporting the fight, they are becoming the primary target. We're entering an era where the methods of sustaining fleets are undergoing this massive technological transformation.
Oh, completely. We are seeing artificial intelligence being heavily integrated into predictive maintenance systems right now.
Which is straight out of sci-fi.
It really is. Instead of waiting for a high-pressure valve on a ship to fail and then urgently flying a replacement part across the globe, AI systems monitor the micro-vibrations of the machinery in real time.
That's crazy.
The software literally predicts the failure weeks in advance and routes the spare part to a port where the ship is already scheduled to dock, effectively eliminating the downtime.
We're also seeing the deployment of autonomous drone ships that are braving contested waters to deliver critical supplies to the front line without risking human lives.
Yeah, drone resupply is huge.
But the capability the source flags as a true game changer is additive manufacturing. Ships are beginning to use heavy-duty 3D printers, utilizing direct metal laser sintering to manufacture their own spare parts right in the ship's machine shop while deployed in the middle of the ocean.
The leap in self-sufficiency there is just remarkable. If a specialized component breaks, you bypass the entire global supply chain. You simply download the secure digital blueprint from a server and print a replacement out of high-grade steel or polymer right there on a pitching deck.
But, and this is the big but, digitizing the entire logistical backbone introduces a massive, glaring vulnerability.
It does.
Because if your predictive maintenance, your fuel routing, and your spare parts manufacturing are all networked, the Achilles heel of the modern fleet is no longer a torpedo.
No, it is a cyber attack. The digitization of supply chains means cyber warfare targeting logistics is rapidly emerging as a supreme strategic threat. The text suggests that future wars will likely not begin with a massive kinetic strike on a warship.
I mean, why risk attacking a heavily armed, highly defended destroyer if you understand that it's useless without fuel and ammunition anyway?
Exactly, you just attack the supply line. Future conflicts could begin with silent, invisible intrusions into the software that manages fuel depot inventories. You just scramble the port scheduling algorithms so supply ships go to the wrong docks.
Or you corrupt the databases tracking the vertical launch system reloads.
Right. Or sever the satellite communications between the replenishment ships and the strike group. If you blind the supply depot, the fleet starves in the dark.
Logistics is now a battlefield in its own right.
It absolutely is. If an adversary can cripple the digital network managing the fuel and the food, they can neutralize an entire carrier strike group before it ever fires a weapon.
Man. So let's pull all this together for a second. We started with the cinematic illusion of the invincible warship and broke it down to its reality, a vulnerable, highly dependent floating city.
Right.
We explored the chaotic physics of underway replenishment, the brutal attrition of precision missiles and galvanic corrosion, and the geopolitical absolute of securing overseas real estate and island bases.
And all of it reinforces the core thesis. Military strength is not measured simply by the number of ships you possess. It's measured by the depth of your magazines, the efficiency of your maintenance, and how effectively you can project and sustain those platforms far from home.
And the source material leaves us looking at this highly networked, digitally dependent future, and that tech transformation we just discussed, specifically the 3D printing of spare parts mid-ocean, presents an incredibly unsettling possibility that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. Think about the cyber threat vector we just outlined. If a navy is relying on digital blueprints to manufacture its own critical components at sea, what happens if an adversary infiltrates that specific server?
Right.
Not to shut the network down or delete the files, which would obviously trigger immediate alarms. What if they just subtly alter the blueprints?
Wait, so instead of breaking the printer, you just secretly alter the infill density on a high-pressure valve blueprint by, 2%?
Exactly. The ship downloads the file, prints it perfectly according to the corrupted data, and installs it. And weeks later, during a high-stress combat maneuver, the structurally weak valve bursts under pressure.
You've effectively tricked a navy into sabotaging its own fleet from the inside.
A Trojan horse for the digital age, slipping past all the billion-dollar missile defense systems without making a single sound.
Wow, the invisible scaffolding holding up global power is fragile indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking past the flashy headlines. Keep questioning those unseen systems that shape our reality. And next time you see a picture of mighty aircraft carrier, remember to look for the rusty supply ship fighting the ocean just to keep it alive.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.